Great. Yeah, welcome. My name is Wes Harbison. This is Restore Your Old Photos with Pixlr. I'm going to just start diving right in here. I kind of always like to start these with just a little bit of information about who I am and why I'm leading this workshop. Like I mentioned, I'm Wes. I'm a public technology assistant at the St. Louis Public Library, specifically in creative experience. Now, if you're not familiar with creative experience, it's a digital makerspace that is, we have two locations. We've got one at Barr Library, which is where I am tonight, and another one at Central Downtown. And at least when we're open to the public, it's a space to edit videos and photos and record music and podcasts. And here at Barr, we do 3D printing and laser cutting, all sorts of fun stuff. So if you're not familiar with us, check us out. And hopefully once we can reopen to the public, you can all stop by. So I'm leading this workshop tonight because I've been interested in photography and editing photos for many years, since I was in high school. That's when I first got started. I don't have any official training in photo restoration. It's just kind of something that I've picked up over the years. But I think it's been on my mind for a long time because my dad is an amateur photographer, and I hardly have any memories about him, especially as a child, where there's not a camera in his hand. So we've got boxes of his old photos, and I know that one day we're gonna sort through all that, and some of it'll be damaged, and we'll want to clean it up and fix it up. So I don't know. That's kind of how I found my way into it. So diving in now, I'm going to kind of make an assumption about everyone here tonight, which is you're probably here because you have some old or damaged photos that you'd like to digitize and clean up. And I'm going to sort of go off that assumption with a sort of 3-step process here. And this is all the intro stuff before we really dive into Pixlr. But we're going to kind of assume this process is find the photos, digitize, and then restore. I'm going to assume you've already found your photos, so we're done with that one. But I do want to talk briefly about the digitization process, because I think it's an important step. You can save yourself a lot of trouble if you cover that part, or if you scan your photos incorrectly early on. So, and I sort of got ahead of myself there. Here's what we're going to cover today overall. So we're going to start with scanning and kind of the ins and outs of that. It'll be surface level. We won't linger on it for too long. We'll move into Pixlr. I'll tell you about that program, and eventually we'll talk about restoration. And I'll go through a demo where I walk through some of the basics that I show in my slideshow. And then we'll kind of wrap things up at the end and have time for questions. So scanning. Again, when the library is open and you can come visit us, we have 2 options for scanning. We've got these photocopiers. They're in every location, so it doesn't have to be just in creative experience. And these have pretty nice flatbed scanners built into them. You just lift up the top there and put your photos down and get to work. But if you really are concerned about getting like a high quality scan, in creative experience, we have flatbed scanners. This is the model we have at Central over here on the right. And we have a newer model at Barr that can also scan film negatives and some slides. So the difference between these 2 machines is going to be that the photocopier is really just for general use, and the flatbed scanner is more specialized and is designed for photos. So ultimately, if you can, I'd recommend you use flatbed, but if you need to use the photocopier because it's convenient or for whatever reason, it's a totally viable option. When you're scanning things in, it's important to know about your file format and your resolution. So there are tons of file formats out there for images. These are 3 really common ones, and I'll just cover them really briefly here. So a JPEG is, we've probably all heard of it. It's a very common file type. And what it's really designed for is compressing images so that the file size is small and you can upload it online and share it easily, right? Because the smaller something is online, the faster it loads over an internet connection. The downside there is that it compresses your image and you lose quality. So it's a trade-off, right? It's do I want a small file size or do I want kind of the most quality I can get out of an image? A PNG is another very common file type, image type. I don't recommend it for scanning in old photos. It's really good for like if you take a screenshot on your computer or on your phone. A lot of times those are saved as PNGs. It captures like digitally generated images really well, but the file sizes get really big once you get into photos. So I don't recommend it, but I did want to touch on it because it's so common. And then a TIFF is probably, I'm guessing fewer of you have heard of that one. That is sort of the opposite of a JPEG. It's great for archiving images. So if I mentioned how the JPEG compresses an image, a TIFF is what they call lossless, meaning you don't lose any quality. So a JPEG is lossy and a TIFF is lossless. So if you absolutely if you have a choice, I absolutely recommend the TIFF. A JPEG will work in a pinch, but TIFF is the ideal situation for scanning in photos you're trying to archive and save. And resolution, jumped ahead of myself there. Resolution refers to kind of the number of pixels that an image is made up of. And when you're scanning in on like a flatbed scanner especially, but to some extent with photocopiers as well, you'll get an option of what resolution you want to use. And 72 and 300 are really common resolutions that you'll see. And you'll also hear resolution referred to as PPI or DPI. PPI stands for pixels per inch. DPI is dots per inch. These terms are used interchangeably a lot. It's not technically correct, but it's so common that usually you can just assume if someone says DPI, they're probably talking about PPI. That's what they actually mean. If you ever find yourself working with a commercial printer, you might talk about DPI, but for our uses, it's all going to be PPI, so pixels per inch. So like I said, 72 and 300 are really common resolutions. We wouldn't want to use 72, it's too small. 300 is kind of a standard resolution for scanning in something that you want like a print quality image, meaning you could print it out and it would reproduce the same way you scanned it in. You can go way higher than that. So I recommend 600. It's a good place to start for scanning in old images. And if it helps to think about it this way, because I know these numbers are a little abstract, and if you've never thought about resolution or PPI too much, it's kind of hard for them to mean much of anything. But if you scan in an image at 300 PPI, pixels per inch, you're going to get a digital image that if you print it out, it'll be the same size that you scanned it in as. So if you scan at 600 and you printed it out, it would be twice the size, right? So so if you ever wanted to blow something up, you would scan it in at a higher resolution. So I recommend starting at 600 if you can. The file sizes will be bigger, but you'll end up with more room to work in the end. So really brief overview there. We'll say now we've digitized our photos. We're done with that step, and we can get on to what everyone is here for tonight, the restoration part. So I'm just going to introduce Pixlr here and kind of give you a tour of the space in a second. So Pixlr is often referred to just as Pixlr, but Pixlr is the company, and it's really a set of tools. Most of them are cloud-based, meaning you just use them online. And it's image editing, and then they have some like services like stock photography and stuff like that. Specifically tonight, we're going to use Pixlr E, which is their sort of advanced photo editor. if you've ever used Photoshop, this is skipping ahead to my last bullet here, but if you've ever used Photoshop, Pixlr is going to look really, really familiar. It is absolutely inspired by it. Yeah, it's just there's no way around it. They're very similar looking. So if you've ever been interested in Photoshop but never used it, Pixlr is a good introduction to it too. So it kind of goes both ways. Yeah, it's been around since 2008, so they've had time to improve it. Even since I first heard of it, they've made a lot of improvements to Pixlr. Oh, and I should add, there are free and premium versions. We're using the free version. There are ads, and there's a little bit less functionality than when you pay for it. I haven't really found it to be an issue, but if you find that you really like Pixlr as we're going through it tonight and you want to look into it, I'm not sure what it costs, but I'm sure they make it easy to find on their website. So if you do want to upgrade, but we're sticking with the free version. We'll see ads pop up here and there, but we just close them out and move on. So we're moving on to the tour. I'm going to show you around the workspace here. So I think everyone should be just seeing the Pixlr website now. Is that right? Okay, cool. Got a couple of nods. Great, thank you. So if you just go to pixlr.com, this is what you see. Right up here at the very top is kind of their list of tools. And then they know that most people are there for photo editing. So you've also got these two down here. And they make it easy. The advanced Pixlr E or the playful Pixlr X. We're jumping into advanced because that's, we just need the tools that are offered in there. So this is kind of the landing page of Pixlr E. Mostly what we'll need is just over here on the left. So we're gonna head over to create new for this tour here. And then they have all these presets. I'm just gonna use full HD because it's what's selected already. We'll give it a name, we'll call it tour. And I'm gonna turn on a background just so it's a little easier for us to visualize it. So this is what you get if you open a blank document. I'll just kind of go around and talk about each of the spaces briefly here. So right up on the top, you see the menu bar. It's unassuming, but there are actually a lot of tools tucked away in these menus. So if you get a chance and you want to come back and play around, there's a lot of stuff in here that we won't touch on at all tonight. But the important stuff to know for tonight is going to be the file menu here, which is where you can open and close and save and print. The saving is particularly important, excuse me, in this case, because you always want to make sure that you've saved kind of like a high quality version of the image you've edited. And we'll kind of touch on that at the end. And then we'll also be spending a lot of time in the adjustment menu. Now, all these are grayed out right now, but we'll come back and we'll go through the important ones tonight. So coming down over here on the left, this is the tool palette. And again, lots of options here. We'll only use a few. I think it's 4 that we'll use this evening. So the arrange tool is very important. It's kind of just like a cursor that allows you to click around. It's your general cursor, I guess you'd call it. The hand tool down on the other end is what lets you drag around. So if you're zoomed in really far, and this is kind of a bad example because I picked all white, but you can click with the hand tool and go from one place to another, and you can probably see my my zoom bars or my navigation bars sliding around there. That makes it very easy to get around. And then for the fun tools, we're going to use heal. And you can see there that Pixlr gives you a little pop-up that tells you about what the tool is, and even gives you a little visual example. So heal helps you remove spots and unwanted objects and things, so you can clean up images. And we'll also use the clone tool, which is similar, but as far as I have been able to tell, the difference between those two, the heal and the clone, is that heal does some guessing. It's Pixlr is making an assumption about what you want changed. And the clone tool, you can actually, like it says there, draw and copy from other areas on the image. You select what part of the image you want it to pull from. And we'll see why that's helpful a little bit later. And then, of course, the zoom tool. you gotta zoom in close sometimes to see these little details we're fixing. And oh, I almost forgot. While I have the zoom tool selected, you'll see up here there's this this bar that I believe is called the tool options bar. So every time you click on a different tool, it'll actually, you can see it change up there. So in the case of zoom, you know, if you need to zoom in or zoom out, or if you want to zoom to 100% or fit your image back in your screen, those are important. And then back here on the heal tool, you don't really have any options, but with the clone tool, oh, I'm sorry, it's because I only have, it's because I don't have an image open. That's what's going on. Okay, we'll come back to that. And I'll show you what those options are once we get an image open later. My mistake. All right, we're almost done with the tour, but I do want to talk about the other side here. So on the far right, we've got 3 areas. First is the navigation pane. This is another way to zoom in and out. You can just drag on this little slider here. When you are zoomed in, you have this red box up here, and you can drag to different parts of the image. That's super handy. I use it all the time. Right below that is the layers palette. It's not super important that we use a lot of layers for this workshop, but it's absolutely foundational to how Pixlr works. So if you do want to come back in and get some more advanced skills in Pixlr, you'll want to spend some time learning about layers if you're not already familiar with them. And then right below that is the history palette or window. I'll demonstrate this later as well, but this is how you can sort of step backward in time through the changes you've made. And I like to use it to toggle back and forth between where I am with the edits I've made and what it looked like in the very beginning. It's always helpful for me to visualize the changes that I've made. And usually I find that they're bigger changes than I think. And this is a way to kind of visualize that. So I'm just gonna go to File and Close there because we're done with our tour. I'm gonna switch back over here to my slideshow. So, and then we're gonna get into restoration basics. So I'm gonna walk through sort of 3 categories here of different types of restoration. And we'll see sort of the beginning and the end, so the before and after, so to speak, and then after that we'll go in and we'll see how you accomplish that. So so the first of the 3 categories is enhancements. So this refers to just kind of general adjustments to the contrast, the highlights, the shadows, trying to bring out, make the image pop a little bit more by just adjusting. I guess contrast would be the simplest way to put it. But it's well, as we'll see later, it's not quite as simple as that. Oh, and the photos I use in the slideshow I just found online. They're in the public domain. I don't know who these people are. It's just an old photo that needed some work. So the original image here, very, very gray, not super pleasant to look at. With Pixlr, we can absolutely clean that up, introduce some contrast, and we can do it in a way that we don't lose too much of the information. Like it's very dark over here. These folks are standing in the shade. Pixlr will allow us to bring up the darker tones without bringing up the light tones so that it's all blown out. And then I'll just to kind of give you a blown up version of this. Here they are, all grayed out. There it is afterwards. So pretty big changes. And this is pretty simple to do too. And there's just a side-by-side, another way to look at what kind of changes we can make. So second category is specks and spots. Yeah, this can happen for a number of reasons. I think in the case of this photo, my theory is that it's one of those really old like glass negatives, and it's been scratched over the years. I'm not certain on that. My photography technology history isn't spot on, but that's my theory. And you can see I was able to clean up a lot of this here on the left. Some of the damage here, if you look at the after image, you can see that it's really hard to remove that. But we can do a lot of good for this image to kind of bring it back to life. And we'll go through that. I will say that this image that I picked for this example is an easy one. They're not always so easy. I lucked out with this sky here. It's all basically a shade of gray, so it's pretty easy to clean up. But as you'll see, we can go into the house too and clean up some of the scratches and spots and things. So again, there's just a close-up view and then what we're able to clean up. All right, last photo, last category here is discoloration. I picked a photo, this is a photographer who I think worked for the government, and so these photos are in the public domain. They're from the 70s, and it seems like a lot of photos from this era have this kind of reddish, kind of yellowish tint to them. I think that's just has to do with the photo paper that was used back then. I'm not certain on that, but even from my dad's photos, I know that the ones from the 70s are just, yeah, they all kind of, they turned reddish over the years. So Pixlr will let us go in and correct that, right? So, you know, we know that these shirts that these kids are wearing, some of them are white. So we can kind of use that as a reference to adjust the photo, and we'll see how that works. And again, these are pretty big changes, right? I mean, we're really pulling a lot of life out of that photo that we had lost to just time. So with that, I think I'm going to jump right in. So let me switch back over here. I guess I could pause here. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Anything they're interested to ask? Also lets me get a drink of water. I'm not hearing any. I lost my chat, so Mary, if anything comes up in there, just feel free to jump in and let me know.
Sounds good.
All right, so our demo of Pixlr. So we're going to switch back over here. I'm going to come over here to open image, and I've already downloaded my 3 photos, so I'll open those up. So this is this window that popped up here is trying to get me to resize my images, and you'll see this when you use it. It's probably the biggest downside to the free version of Pixlr. You'll remember earlier when I said scan your photos in at a high resolution, right? Because it gives you more room to work. The downside of the free version of Pixlr is that they don't really want to go any bigger than 3,000 pixels, which you can see right here. Now that's not tiny, but it's not as big as I'd like. So that's the trade-off of using a free tool like this. I will add right here that in the future, I hope to be able to do this workshop again in person and use Adobe Photoshop, which will let you make gigantic images. So I wish we had more flexibility here, but it's just the way it is. In this case, just for this workshop, I'm going to scale mine down so they load a little faster. But I encourage you to use the original button here if you load your own in. So we're going to hit apply. It's going to open all those up. And you'll see now right under our tool options bar, I've now got my tabs for each of these photos. So photo number 1 here, we're just going to do general enhancements. So I'm going to all of my tools for this photo are all going to be under the adjustment menu. Excuse me, sorry, forgot the word there for a second. The adjustment menu that I mentioned earlier, and you can see that these have lit up now. They're not grayed out. Now I'm going to start with brightness and contrast. And when you click on a tool, it opens up with this kind of floating window. You can drag it wherever you need to. I always pull it out of the way so I can see what I'm doing with the photo. Brightness is pretty self-explanatory. If you pull it up, it's just going to brighten up your image, and you can blow it all the way out. No reason to do that. You can also make it very dark if you go into the negative numbers here. Again, no reason to do that. On this image, I actually don't need to change my brightness, but I do want to address my contrast. So again, a simple slider, you just pull it up and you can see as we pull that up, that is already breathing a lot of life back into that photo. I could go all the way to 100 and then I could hit apply, and I think it would even let me come back in and pull it up even more if I needed to. But I'm not gonna go all the way there. And the reason I'm not is because if you look up in the sky here, we've got this kind of splotchy stuff, which I think is it's just like damage to the paper, right? So it doesn't actually look good. You wouldn't really want it there. But when I pull that contrast all the way up, those gray spots start to disappear. And that means I'm adding in so much contrast. I'm pulling up the light tones so much that information is disappearing from this photo, which I don't want to do if I can avoid. And I'll show you later, if I keep pushing those light tones, we'll actually start to lose the kind of texture and the white dresses here. And if we can help it, we want to keep that in there. So I'm pretty happy with that around 75. Now there's one other little button here. When you hover over it, it says compare. And so if you just hold that down, you can see what we've done already, which is a huge change. It's just one simple tool will do that much for you. So I'm gonna hit apply. And now you can see over here in the history palette or window that brightness and contrast has showed up under open. And if I didn't like it, I could click on open to go back, or I could come up to edit and undo. But I'm happy with it, so we're gonna leave it. I'm gonna show you a couple other, or rather 3 other tools in here. So levels and curves, oh, let me back up there. Levels and curves are really common photo editing tools. They're used really heavily in Photoshop too, if you've ever gotten in there, or if you're ever interested in getting into Photoshop. I always start with levels, but you might find the more you do this, you like to start with curves. But what we're seeing in this levels toolbox here is a histogram. So this is a graph of the tones in the image from literal black to literal white up here, and then grays in the middle, sort of like I guess the most neutral gray in between black and white. And you can see that we've got a lot of dark grays, like this huge spike of sort of medium dark grays, and then a lot of lighter grays, and then a little tiny spike over here of just pure white. So a good rule of thumb when you're using the levels window is when you have sort of this like flat line area, you can pull this basically as far in as you need to where it just starts to turn up on the graph, to raise up, where you start getting that curve. So sometimes you don't even need to look at your image that closely to know just to pull that in. Now I feel like it definitely made those darker tones a lot richer. I feel like that looks good. It might be a little darker than I want over here in the shadows. A lot of photo editing is just tedious, moving levers back and forth. It can be slow, but you know, you just kind of find what looks good to your eye. And I don't want to go too dark on there because I don't want to lose their clothes. Not that we have a clear view necessarily, but we'll do our best. This bar down here is a feature of this tool I never use. It basically allows you to like raise up what the like literal black is, and you could make it a gray color, so it would sort of just push all those dark tones up, or you could bring all the dark tones down. I never really find that I need to use that. And then I do want to talk about these dots up here real quick too. I know we won't all be working with black and white images. So we've got 4 dots, I should say. This top dot represents all colors. In this case, it's just black and white and gray for this photo. If we had color in this photo, you would have red, green, and blue represented here. And you could go in and adjust the lightness and darkness of each of those tones individually. And without getting too deep into this, the reason it's red, green, and blue is that's because you may have heard the term RGB before. That's how digital images are presented on screen, is this sort of color combination. Technically speaking, all images on screens are just made up of those three colors, kind of overlaid in different ways, which gives you the full range of colors. So that's why you see those three there. But like I said, it doesn't apply to this image. So I'll just kind of look at what I did. I think that looks a lot better with those the darker tones brought out a bit, and we'll hit apply. We're gonna go back into adjustments and down to curves. Now curves does a pretty similar thing to the levels window, which is why they're often talked about together. But it's sort of a different way of approaching it. So here we have a graph essentially, and you've got this line running through this diagonal line. Where the line is at right now references the image as it appears currently. And that's a kind of a weird way to phrase it, but if we double click, we can add different points to this line. And then when you drag those points around, you'll see that affects different parts of the image. When you're using the curves tool, the most common advice is going to be make an S curve. So you'll see that this is a slight S, right? It's a little bit of a curve there. I mean, you could really push it and get like a full S, but it does some kind of wacky things to that photo. So if you drag the top dot up a little bit, it'll lighten things up. If you drag the bottom one down, it'll darken things a little bit. So it's just another way to add contrast. But if you had an image that was really out of sorts, you could come in here and maybe like lower the lighter tones, lighten the darker tones. In this case, I'm just pushing it back into gray, which is not what we want. So again, I don't want to go too far here. You can kind of see as I push the light tones up, we're starting to lose the definition in the white dresses there, which we don't want to do. So I'm just going to push it just a little bit to give us just a little more contrast. And with this one, I feel like it really brought out the hair, especially of the two girls on the left here. It made the darker tones in the hair look a lot richer to me. So I think it's a good addition. So we'll hit apply there. And I've got one more tool to talk about quickly for this image, and then I'll move on. So this is going to be highlights and shadows. And similar to all the other tools, it's just another way to address the light tones and the dark tones. What's handy about this is like with the curves and the level, sorry, I'm blanking on the names here. Yeah, curves and levels. When you change one thing, it affects everything. With highlights and shadows, it's just attacking the light colors or the light tones and the dark tones. So in this image, I think we're pretty happy with where we're at already, but I could bring down my highlights a little bit if I thought it needed that. Like maybe I pushed it too far. And you could bring it all the way down. Doesn't look good, but I could bring them down just a little bit maybe. And then if my shadows were too dark, I could use this window to pull up those shadows just a little bit. So again, I don't lose these three over here. So really, I think I'm happier with it a little bit lower. So I'll just hit apply there. So that's it. And then just to compare using the history over here, if we go back over to open, that is where we started. And just with 4 tools, we made that look a lot nicer. So we brought that back to life. So moving on to photo number 2 here. This is a picture, like I mentioned before, with tons of specks and spots in it. I'm gonna first off just zoom way in so we can start looking at these things up close. They do not look nice, but like I said, the sky will make it very easy to clean these up. So I'm gonna show you the heal and the clone tool here. So heal, we can see now that we have options up on the tool options bar that we didn't have before. I'll come back to those in a minute, but what you first get when you click on the little band-aid tool, the heal tool, is this circle with a little crosshair in it, I suppose. And if you just kind of click on these spots, it's going to look at what's in that circle and make a guess about what you want to remove, like what you want to fix. So with this image, it's very easy to just go through and click on these until they're gone. Now, if you get into bigger, more complicated shapes, you'll see that weird things will start to happen. So if I click on these kind of darker gashes here, it just like blurs them because it thinks it's not sure what to remove. So it's like averaging the sort of the sky and the scratch. And obviously that doesn't look good. So when you run into something like that, this infill option works a little bit better. With patch, it's easier just to click in one spot and move. With infill, you can kind of paint over an area and include maybe like a broader bit of the sky, and then it will hopefully know to remove just that scratch. And there it goes, yeah. So we just cleared that spot up. And that works for kind of broader, bigger issues like this border on top. I'm gonna try to address it. I can't guarantee it's gonna work out. Sometimes it's just trial and error. And this one also, you're seeing it just takes a second to load too. I selected a pretty big area, so it's Pixlr's turning its gears, trying to figure out what to do. And in that case, it did not work out. We obviously we don't want that to happen to the image. So I'm just going to go to Edit, Undo, or you can do Control Z, and we would have to address that a different way. So that's the introduction to the Heal tool. Now I'm also going to come down here to the Clone tool, and like I mentioned before, what this one does is you choose a source, and you can see up here you have your option for that. So Source and Paint. So I've got Source selected. I know I want the sky to just look kind of uniformly like the sky. So I'm going to click in a blank area there. You'll see that it switched over to paint. And now I can paint over these specks. And you'll see I have two cursors moving at once, right? So it's basically pulling from this area over here that's already been fixed and painting over the bad stuff. So this can be really handy if you know that you've got one area that looks good, and you just want to fix it by sampling because it all kind of looks the same. Now the downside to this is, and it might be hard to tell across Zoom, but right up here, the tone in the sky was just slightly off, and I wish I could make it clearer for folks. Can you all tell that there's a slight difference there? A little bit maybe. It's really minor. But you know, it would probably stand out if you started doing it across the whole sky. So that's kind of the downside to using the clone tool, because when you're pulling from the middle sky here, if the side sky is a little darker, you're going to start seeing those tones, like seeing that contrast. So that's where you want to move back over to the Heal tool and just try to fix those spots, kind of average out what you see in there. So I'm not going to linger on this too long because you could just spend hours and hours on this image trying to clean it up. This is definitely tedious work. But I do want to show you that it's not just the sky. You know, the house works too. It's trickier though. So what I'm going to do is switch back over to Patch, and then my size here will change the size of my my Heal brush. So I'm gonna bring that down to maybe a 12, yeah. And then we can start going through on the house and cleaning up the little specks and spots and things. I'd want to use infill for this longer one. But you know, there's some texture on the house, and it does a pretty good job of catching these little things. It also works for the grass too, right? Like that's a pretty uniform kind of texture in this photo. So you've got these little specks here, and I can click around, and it recognizes that there's a pattern, and we're trying to get rid of what goes against the pattern, essentially, visually anyway. Now the stuff on the side, I'll just mention briefly. Because of this is up in the sky, we could definitely tackle that. It would take some playing around, but we could use Pixlr to remove this stuff. Over here in the trees, personally, I haven't found that Pixlr is quite strong enough to handle all these little details. So when you run into instances like this, sometimes you just do the best you can do. You've restored your photo partially, and that's better than not at all.
We do have one question. What if the smudge is on a face?
Ooh, that's tricky because you we're just so tuned into the details of faces. If you had a really high quality image and the smudge was small enough, you could probably remove it using one of these tools. The example I can think of is when I first started learning to edit photos in high school, I was very popular with some of my friends because I learned how to remove acne off of photos of us. And for a little while, everyone wanted me to do that for them. So just depending on the size of the smudge and the quality of the scan, you can remove stuff without kind of running into an issue where the face gets distorted. But it just sort of depends on the source material and the gravity of the damage, I guess. Yeah, wish I had a more solid answer for you. Okay, I do want to move on to our last photo here. So this is the one that's got the kind of red tint to it because it's just from that vintage where a lot of photos have that. And we're going to tackle this using 3 different tools back up here in the adjustment menu. So, and we'll see that one of them doesn't really help this image too much, but I do want to touch on it because it can be handy. But I want to start with temperature and tint here. Temperature and tint, it's kind of just what it sounds like, right? The temperature of the image, you can tell it's warm. It's got a warm temperature to it. But you'll see that on temperature, on one side, you've got kind of a blue. On the other side, you've got kind of a yellow. You don't really have the full range of color represented there because in between those two is just green. So that's where tint kind of comes into play, where you have kind of a reddish, I think it's magenta technically, and then green on the other side of that. So with these 2 sliders, you can get a lot done. So what I tend to do is I just look at the image and see what I want to move away from. So this has a lot of red. Magenta is going to be the closest to that. So we're just going to slide in the opposite direction. And you can see that already helps a lot. If we go too far, it's going to get really green. So, so you got to be careful, find a good middle ground in there. And we'll say something in there looks all right. But what I see now is there's kind of a little bit of a green, but definitely kind of a yellow kind of overtone to this image still, which was probably part of that red. So yellow is up here on temperature. We want to drag towards blue. And to my eye, at least, I mean, I think that really starts to pull out like what the image probably looked like originally. And again, you can push these too far, get a really strange tint in the other direction, but you can get a lot done with just the temperature and tint tool. And then just to compare here, super red, and we were able to really get that red out of there. So I'm gonna hit apply there. Now there's other stuff going on with this image where we might want to use the tools like we used on the first photo where we adjust the contrast and things. Unfortunately we can hardly see her face at all. So while I'm demonstrating kind of color correction tools here, you'd want to use a combination of all the tools to get your image looking sharp. So the second tool I want to talk about is hue and saturation. Hue and saturation also comes with lightness. We've seen this already. It just lightens and darkens the image. We might lighten the image just a little bit here, but I'll come back to it in a second. Hue is going to refer to kind of an overall cast on the image. We started with red, and we've already removed it. There's not much that we need to remove here anymore in terms of a color cast, but you can use this tool to do that. It's super heavy-handed, and so I don't find myself using it very much. It's almost better if you want to apply a color cast on it, which if you're restoring a photo, you probably don't want to do. But the saturation tool is very alluring because a lot of old photos are, the colors have faded over time. And so it can be really tempting to just add saturation back in to bring those colors out. And you can see that helps, like the red especially really starts to pop when we drag that up. The thing about the saturation tool is it's another tool you can be, it's very easy to go too heavy on. So if we pull that all the way up, and at first glance, it might look kind of nice to see that red pop out of there, but you can see like it's done a bunch of other weird things here. Especially you can tell in the border, there's this black border on here. That's looking kind of like almost like a bluish green now, which probably means that the other darker tones close to black in this image also have that tint on them. So I would not push it that far. So if we look at where we started, it almost looks pale or just, yeah, desaturated compared to what we looked at. But I would just go up just a little bit. Like here, 30% looks good to me. I just really recommend don't go too hard on the saturation. So we'll hit apply on that one. And now we want to look at color balance. And this is probably the most complicated sort of image correction tool we'll look at this evening. So what you can do here, you have a lot of options. So you can choose your range of tones, right? So shadows is going to be your darkest tones, highlights will be your lightest, and the midtones is what's in the middle. So kind of the, if this was black and white, it would be the what's gray. And you can go in, and I mentioned that there's kind of this dark, or in the black up here, we've got this sort of like greenish blue cast going on this border that I don't like too much. Makes me worried about the rest of the image. And we could select shadows because we know it's a dark tone, and we could try to remove that by like pulling the green out. And you can see that starts to do weird things again really quick here. It's kind of starting to look purple to me. So this tool is really tricky. And it can take a lot of just going back and forth and saying, well, maybe I need to do it in the highlights, or, do I want to pull the red down and like pull the red down in the highlights, but bump it in the shadows? It's tricky, and we're not going to become experts in it right here. I've been using a tool like this in Photoshop for years, and I still find myself at times scratching my head about exactly how these tones and colors get distributed. So I did want to introduce it because it can help you kind of bring your image back to life, but it is tricky. There's also this preserve luminosity slider down here. You can turn that on and off. Basically what that's referring to there is when you adjust the shadows, midtones, and highlights, it can affect how bright the image looks. If you preserve the luminosity, then it will maintain how bright it was when you first started. I recommend leaving it on, but I also recommend that you play around, and if it looks better off, that's great. So I'm gonna hit apply here. Actually, I'm gonna hit cancel because I didn't really like those changes too much. And I do just want to compare again. We can see that we pulled a lot of life out of the image. It still needs some work. I would want to go back in and adjust the contrast and the highlights and shadows overall. But I think we're kind of getting close. Oh yeah, we're getting close. We're getting close to the end here. So I don't want to linger too long on this. I'm going to come back over to the slideshow here, and we'll just kind of wrap up. So just to review everything we went over real quick. So in the enhancements on the first photo, we use brightness and contrast. You can get a lot done with just the contrast if you have a very like gray kind of neutral photo. Levels and curves are two tools that work together. They do kind of the same thing, but in different ways. Like I said, I always start with levels and then go into curves from there. If you find the opposite works for you, that's great. Highlights and shadows, another way to do kind of the same thing, but in a more, where you're isolating the highlights versus the shadows. For specks and spots, scratches and things, we've got the heal tool and the clone tool, so the little band-aid and the little stamp. They both have their pros and cons. It might be a matter of just seeing what works best for each situation on each image you're trying to clean up. Discoloration, that third image there, temperature and tint is a big one. Hue and saturation depends on the image, and then color balance, tricky, but it can be really useful. So I do just want to leave us with a few final thoughts here, and then we'll have time for questions if anyone has any. The best way to learn is to play around. I stand by this. It takes time, and you have to set aside the time to play around, but the good news with image editors is you can't do any harm ultimately. You know, your original image is going to be saved to your computer. You can open something up and just use whatever tool you want. And if you mess it up, you close it out and start over. So the best way to learn this stuff is to just dig in and play around. If you do find that you're getting into the flow of this and you want to restore a lot of images, I want to just touch back on to the digitization that I mentioned in the beginning. Consider your workflow. You know, this can be tedious, slow work, important work, but tedious. So I would say think about your workflow. Maybe don't scan one image at a time. You know, scan it, go edit. You know, if you can scan them all at once and you find a good sort of batch of settings that works for you, I recommend doing all your scanning and then all your image editing. So just think about it as a bigger project, I guess, is my recommendation there.
We do have one question. Can I use a photo that has been emailed?
A photo that has been emailed. In theory, yeah. I mean, you can drop any photo into Pixlr and work with it. I guess I'll say that the sort of rule of thumb for emails is that they don't handle attachments that are larger than 25 megabytes. And if you're trying to get a real good high quality scan of an image, it could be less than 25 megabytes. Sometimes it's a lot bigger. It depends on the resolution and what it was, like how big the original image was too. So I guess what I'm saying there is the image you've been emailed, it might not be the highest quality for a good like long-term restoration. But maybe it's good enough, and it's just better to have something rather than nothing. I don't want to discourage you if it's something you want to clean up. Yeah. Thanks for the question. Right. Finishing up here, advanced techniques in Adobe Photoshop. If you're interested in this, dig in deeper. There's a lot more to know. We really scratched the surface here. Photoshop would be the next step up. It's expensive. It is absolutely not free. But we do offer it here in Creative Experience. So again, when we're open again, please come in. If you want to learn it, we have a lot of resources for it. And I'll be around so I can help you get started with Photoshop as well. Also, if you're really, really into this, I know that there are people out there who will pay you to restore their photos. So if you really take a liking to this, consider it as like a side job or something. I've met people left and right who just have all these old photos and they don't know their way around a computer, and they would just love someone to do this work for them. So something to keep in mind. And then this one little thing I just like to touch on at the end here is thinking about what's appropriate to alter. These are your images. Ultimately, you get to choose what to do with them. But I gave the example of photoshopping out acne from photos of my friends in high school, right? At the time, everyone loved that because nobody wanted photos of themselves with acne on Facebook, or MySpace was what was popular when I was in high school. But you know, when you think about that from like a historical angle, you know, that's not a true representation of what that person looked like at the time. So I would just keep in mind that these tools are pretty powerful, and you can get to use them in a way where you can start removing people from images, or I don't know, changing the scenery in a photo. And it's just I would urge you to consider, like, be thoughtful about if you're restoring these for like historical reasons, or if you're just kind of playing around and doing the digital manipulation, like what's important to you there. So questions, sorry, I feel like I went on a little long there. We've got a few minutes left, but and here's my email too if you want to reach out to me. But yeah, if there are any questions, I am happy to take them.
We do have another one. How do you determine your photo's PPI? For example, if the properties tell you its dimensions are 1,332 by 2002, is that the same as PPI?
So that's the pixel count. So all digital images are measured in pixels. And this can get really confusing because you have like a digital image size and then a print image size, and that's the resolution is kind of the go between the digital and the print size. So gosh, the way I always do it is I open it in Photoshop, but that is not an option here. Let me look real quick. Image size. Okay, so do I still have I'm still sharing my screen, right? Everyone can see what I pulled up. Okay, thank you. So in Photoshop, if you pull up this same window, I went to image and image size. In Photoshop, they will tell you your PPI. It'll say resolution, and then it'll tell you 72 or 300 or any other number. Pixlr, it looks like they don't do that. They just give you the pixel size. That's unfortunate. I guess the trick, the rule of thumb would be the more pixels, the better. I'm trying to think of a good example here. Well, because of a printer we have here at the library that prints up to 36 inches wide. It's our large format printer. I know just because I've been working with it that an image with a PPI of 300 printed at 36 inches, the pixel count is 10,800. So if you think about it this way, if you want an image to print out 36 inches wide, you need 10,800 pixels. That's a huge image. We saw that Pixlr doesn't want to work with anything bigger than 3,000. Yeah, I would just look at the pixel count, and the higher the better. I wish I had an easier. I wish I had like an equation I could give you to figure out what your PPI is. But sometimes you need software to figure that out. Yeah, I rambled on that one. I hope that was helpful. Oh, I'll add one thing. When you're scanning in images, it will let you select the resolution. So that's one way to know too. So if you're starting from scratch and you're using a scanner software, you might have to open up the advanced settings, but it should let you know what resolution you're selecting and what you're scanning in at. Anything else? I think we're right at 7. So if anyone needs to go, feel free. Thank you for joining us, but I'll hang around for questions for a few minutes. All right, well, cool. I'm seeing some comments now. I finally got my comments back. Yeah, Catherine.
I don't use Zoom, so I don't really know how to ask questions, but I unmuted myself. So you said something about something creative at the library.
Yes.
But I didn't know what you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah. So creative experience is the department that I work in. It's where I'm coming to you from tonight. So have you heard of creative experience before? I don't want to give you the speech if you know about it.
No, I haven't.
Okay. Just briefly, it's what we call a digital makerspace. So it's a room basically with a lot of computers, and the computers are loaded up with software for things like this, editing photos, but also editing video. I'm coming from our recording room, so it's like a little recording studio. You can see the fancy mic right here. So yeah, you can record podcasts, record music. It's a space for that. Right now we're closed to the public, so no one can come in right now except for staff. But yeah.
Is that at Central?
Sorry, good question. We have one at Central and one at Bar. Bar's at Jefferson and 44, basically. Yeah.
All right, when you open, I'll be there.
Great, yeah, looking forward to it. Any other questions?
Thank you so much. I learned a lot this evening. I'm ready to play with it. Thank you.
Good, I'm glad to hear it, of course. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course, yeah.
You know that the flatbed scanner, is that in the creative space?
Yes, yeah, so the one I showed in the slideshow is the one we have at Central, and we have one here at Bar as well, which is a little bit nicer than that one actually.
Okay.
So yeah, if you especially if you have film to digitize, you would want to come to Bar because that scanner can handle like negatives.
Okay. Yeah, I have some.
Good. Yeah. Cool. Anyone else?
I would just like to say thank you very much. I enjoyed it, and I learned a lot today.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you very much, Wes. Appreciate your time.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Well done, Wes. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan.
There.
All right. I guess we'll call it. Everyone have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks.